What is digital overwhelm? I think it is the intersection of massive, rapid, intense technological development. The intersection of that development with a broad range of feelings. Sometimes people are energized by technological development. It's like caffeine for them. They get really
Mhm.
excited. And other people are frightened or made uneasy by it or anxious. Sort of like I felt the other night when I was trying to figure out what DeepSeek was. Everybody was talking about it, and I felt this kind of rising anxiety about this new kind of artificial intelligence out of China.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up.
Hi, guys. Welcome back to Neff Inspiration, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stefan Neff. Today, I've got Craig Mattson with me. And I was really looking forward to this interview because Craig's mission is to highlight the impact of the digital noise that we are constantly exposed to. And it is such an important bit because there's enough uncertainty out there, enough pressure on us. Yet, this beautiful tool of electronics, our cell phone, can be such a double-edged sword. And let's explore that and let's see what we can actually do about it in a realistic way. Because we can't just wish these things away. They are there to last, and in the contrary, they will become more prevalent. Yet they have a lot of potential dangers that many of us, especially the younger generation, are not aware of. So, Greg, thank you so much for being a guest on my show.
I am grateful to be here. I am only moderately digitally overwhelmed today, so I'm hopeful I can be coherent with your questions. We'll see how it goes.
Well, in the first instance, I think we both have switched our electronics onto flight mode. And that's something that so many of us are probably not even aware exists, unless you're flying, okay? When do you ever switch off your electronics nowadays? And
Mm,
I
mm.
see that as a major risk. Having said that, that's my perception. Let's look at the figures. How many people are out there with screen times that are probably not so great for their life? Do we have figures on that?
Well, my research was qualitative.
Mm,
So I spoke with some 47
mm,
rising professionals in Gen Z and
mm,
Millennial
mm,
demographics.
mm,
And when I talked with them about overwhelm, I didn't always use the same term. I
mm,
wanted to leave it just a little bit open to see where they would
mm,
take it. And
mm,
sometimes I would say vocational overwhelm or communicational overwhelm. But I finally settled on digital overwhelm as the kind of unifying
mm,
factor of trouble
mm,
in contemporary society.
mm,
So, um, what are the stats on their usage? That wasn't a question I
mm.
asked, but I can report that everybody seemed to know immediately what I was talking about. I didn't have to define the terms. I think there may have been like one or two people who said, "Hey, like, what do you mean by digital overwhelm?" And I have had one student, I'm a professor, and I've had one student who just said, "No, I'm not digitally overwhelmed. Like that's just not a thing for me." So that he was definitely an outlier, but in far and away, in every case that I saw, that the people I spoke with, they didn't hem or haw over the term digital overwhelm. They were like, "I'm there. That's where I live. That's my address." So I want to
Interesting.
say something like 99%.
Uh,
Very high number. Very high number.
Indeed.
What is digital overwhelm? I think it is the intersection of massive, rapid, intense technological development. The intersection of that development with a broad range of feelings. Sometimes people are energized by technological development. It's like caffeine for them. They get really
Mm,
excited. Um, and other people are frightened or made uneasy by it or anxious. Sort of like I felt the other night when I was trying to figure out what DeepSeek was. Everybody was talking about it, and I felt this kind of rising anxiety about this new kind of artificial intelligence out of China. That's digital overwhelm. It's the meeting point of technological development and powerful feelings of various sorts, right? And I think that in answer to your question, yeah, the digital overwhelm I was seeing from my research participants often did pertain to the phone. It pertained to the screens in their lives more broadly, especially in their work lives. So I do think the screen is sort of a center for us of digital overwhelm today, whether we're on a mobile screen like the phone or whether we're on a laptop screen. If you'll pardon a really quick story, somebody has said that being Generation X like I am means that you're always like condemning your partner for using their phone too much in that very brief period of time when you're not using yours.
Ooh,
And
ouch. Oh, I love that. I
so
love
one
that.
day I said to my spouse, like, I think you've been on your phone just like you're on your phone way too much. And she said, I don't think I am. Like, let's check our phone usage. And so we compared notes, and the numbers didn't look good for me, Stefan. The numbers did not turn out to be what I had hoped. So yes, we are on our screens a lot, and I am very much on my screen
Yeah.
a lot.
But then again, it depends on what you do. At the moment, I'm creating courses. At the moment, I'm
Mm-hmm.
laying down an ecosystem for my future practice as a functional medicine practitioner. I spend probably 10 hours a day on the screen and
Mm-hmm.
working on things, creating on things. That is at the moment my work. So screen time, is that really the
Measure?
appropriate
Yeah.
measure? Yeah. That's interesting that we need to take that, pick that apart, because what is overwhelm? Overwhelm is a negative response
Mm-hmm.
that you're aware of negativity that is
Mm-hmm.
brought in, maybe a stress, turning into a distress in response to your behavior. So I think if we do that overwhelm, if we define it like
Mm-hmm.
that, then
Mm-hmm.
it means that something in you is realizing that other needs are not met. Is that fair to
Mm-hmm.
say? When we
I
say
love that
overwhelm?
way of putting
Yeah.
it.
Therefore, it's not really a bad thing with being overwhelmed. I think it is a message from your body to and from your soul, from your heart, from
Mm-hmm.
however you want to define it, that
Mm-hmm.
there are other things out there that are equally as important or maybe more important to
Mm-hmm.
you. You could argue that, hang on, if you are actually at the moment really focusing on doing a research project, or in my case, functional medicine, I'm soaking that stuff up. So if I drive somewhere, I will listen to a functional medicine podcast and thinking, oh yeah, cool, I've learned something. It's a source of joy, certainly not a source of
Mm-hmm.
overwhelm.
Oh
So
yeah.
so the screen time or the listen time, etc., might not be the appropriate thing to look at.
Mm.
When people say they were overwhelmed, what was overwhelming
Mm-hmm.
them?
I have a couple of stories to share, but I think about digital overwhelm as the intersection of two kinds of ocean currents. So there are rip tides, they're
Hmm.
surface currents, they move along the surface of the water. And I think of that as like the technological development in our life. These rip tides like sweep through, and you just kind of got to go with them because they're just there. They're taking you somewhere. You can maybe swim out to the side of them like you're supposed to do in a riptide, but you also just sometimes have to go with it.
Hmm.
Okay, my software is being updated. I got to go with it, or whatever.
Yeah.
But then there's another kind of current, and that's an upwelling, and that comes from the deeps. And that upwelling current is what I see as the kind of emotional response that you feel in yourself, like,
Absolutely.
oh, like this is making me feel joy, like you said, or it's making me feel gross or exhausted
Yeah.
or scared or whatever. And so I was listening for that as people talked about their overwhelm. And I remember one person who happened to be she worked on a television set for a Chicago show, and she was an electrician. And she described an experience of technological breakdown. That in some way or another, the electronics weren't working that day.
Hmm.
And it was one of those fishbowl moments where everybody on the set is just looking at you while you're trying to fix the damn thing. It was truly technologically overwhelming. And she noted that some people would say, I'm going to deal with this emotionally later. And she said, I couldn't do that. I felt overwhelmed. And so, as quickly as I could, I left the set. I went to a bathroom stall and I wept. I just sobbed. And then I got that out of my system. Then I went back to work. And, so that was one response, a just kind of extreme emotional outburst. I also heard about the exact opposite. So I'm thinking of a Haitian American woman professional in sort of a nonprofit sector, also in the Midwest, and she described the experience of being in a digital video workshop, maybe kind of like what you're designing, Stefan, and it was on a subject matter that was really close to her ethnic experience, and she felt tears welling. She felt deeply moved by what she was seeing in the video, and her white colleagues were like, this is good, let's go to the next thing. They weren't like uncompassionate, but they weren't particularly moved by it. Yeah. And that gap in the video workshop that they were in between her experience and theirs, it forced her to turn off her camera, kind of get herself together. She said she had to ugly cry for a while. That's how she put it. I ugly cried. And when she came back on, she said, I put on the face. And then she showed me this face. And it was a pretty fierce demeanor. That was just how she had to cope, with the situation. She was a hilarious person. She was really funny, kind of like had a stand-up sort of comic wit, but she was very serious about the face. It was a pretty serious coping mechanism for her when she was faced with that. I guess a kind of emotional gap between her and her colleagues online.
What I hear there is people suddenly being thrown into chaos and decompensating. So suddenly there's calm Zen-like mode, then you have got stress, then you have got distress. And these people are going from there to there. And you have got immediately some trauma responses that are coming out, the tears. And I think that is normal and that is beautiful. I think the overwhelm and the distress comes then in because people don't know how to deal with that, how to deal with those negative emotions, because that's typically what we are running away from. If you take fear, for example, I remember one day I was just outside of the hospital. Can you come in? We have got I think less than 1 year old kid which airway is obstructed. We can't deal with it. This is life and death. Can you come in?
My goodness.
And this is sort of the worst case scenario for an anesthetist, where you think, oh my God. And I remember that fear response, that adrenaline kicking in. But I had trained myself with that kind of fear to absolutely feel it. I feel now a response where I've got goosebumps and where I've got adrenaline kicking in as we speak, as if it was happening there.
Wow.
But I do allow myself to feel that for a fraction of a second, maybe a second or so, and say, okay, hello, fear, good old friend, it's good to see you. And now fuck off, because I've got a job to do. So I can compartmentalize. But you need to recognize what it is. And if you can name it, you can tame it. And I think many people in nowadays society have not had that experience. There is no fear inoculation. Like soldiers, they certainly tier 1 operators. They constantly work outside of their comfort zone until being outside of your comfort zone is absolutely normal. And you accept what fear is, but you do it anyhow. And it's those kind of things. And I think we are missing that in nowadays society. So both examples that you gave me were actually very intriguing from that point of view. That people, that she then she was initially the victim and she became the survivor with the fierce warrior face. Cool. You saw real coping mechanisms coming out, or the lack thereof. Yes. But I dare to say that the same would have occurred if someone has cut her off, or if she would have found out that maybe her husband has betrayed her. So both cases that were absolutely nothing to do with digital.
I'm studying digital communication, so everywhere I look, I see the digital, I see the technological.
Absolutely.
But I have had readers of the book say, is it really all digital? And, I think it's overdetermined. I think there are more factors at play. Humans are complex, emotional animals, and so there's always lots of things
Mm.
animating us at any given moment.
Mm.
I will say, Stefan, that in my case, as I talked with these Gen Z and Millennial professionals, I'm a Gen Xer. I think I might have mentioned that.
Mm.
And my instinct, my impulse is keep your head down, keep working,
Mm.
get the shit done.
Mm. Exactly.
And yeah, they might not be that way. And I think their approach to work differed from mine in part because they were more mindful. They were more emotionally aware of how they
Mm.
were feeling.
And
That's
you
something
could,
I felt like I learned from them.
oh, absolutely true. And you could, of course, argue that, hang on, if you spend 6 or 8 hours on your phone or on your screen, then there will be a lot of negative stimuli coming out of that screen. So therefore, there may very well be on a Venn diagram might be a huge overlap that digitally there is an overwhelm because most of their stimuli come from the digital world. Let that
Right.
be an
Yeah.
email, let that be whatsoever. Their experience is half of the world is
Yes.
electronic. So therefore, actually, you might be very much there on the point.
Yes.
We link the screen with a lot of things. If you think on the media, no one is buying a newspaper. News is coming through the screen. And I don't know the percentages, but I would say 95% of the news is negative, is terror, is things. So a lot of negative things are coming through the screen.
But a lot of it seemed to come down to how much do I owe my institution? How much do I owe my organization?
Interesting.
Um,
Interesting.
and so, and like you said, most of that organizational life during COVID and then in an era of remote and hybrid work, a lot of that comes down to screen time, right? As you pop open your laptop and you're at work.
Your sample is really showing a lack of distinction between now I'm at work, now I'm not at work. So it's the disease of being a business owner, so to speak. Even if you're employed, you're constantly at it and you're burning out from it. Is that what I can equate there to what you have perceived with your
I do
things?
think there's a blurry line. Yeah, there's a blurry line between private and professional life.
Yeah.
One other example that comes to mind in relation to the question you just asked was someone who had been hired by a company and hadn't yet met anybody in person, only meeting people through screens.
Right.
And in her case, the choices you asked about, like what choices are they making? The choices she had to make were how much to say, how much to ask, and how much just to watch. Initially, her impulse, she's a very dialogic person, her
Right.
impulse was, let me jump into conversation with these people. And then she gradually figured out that wasn't actually effective. They were too busy or they weren't particularly good at it. And so she said, I was left to my own resources of having to keep my mouth shut and watch the screen and see what cues I could get that way. I think sometimes the choices that working professionals make pertain to what they say or don't say in a given work situation, often in digital spaces.
The good old recommendation that you have got one mouth, 2 ears, and that you should use it in the same ratio is often difficult for us. Okay. Having said that, if you're, of course, in person there, you have got the advantage of seeing far more. You can sense what is going on in the room. You know the vibes. You can see more than just the face. You can see them fidgeting. There's so much of nonverbal communication that is coming out when you're actually literally there. So it gives you so many more cues of what's really going on. So just looking on a small screen, that gives you very, very little. And that, of course, increases anxiety and that increases our lack of perception, our ability to see what's really going on. We only see the mask that people show us. And you don't get the other cues to actually disarm that. So I can see where that makes it more difficult. You're coming from a more organizational point of view in your study. People were often more referring to the interface of screens as it relates to their work, to their physical work. If you would have done maybe the same thing with a group of nurses or with a group of teachers, things like that, you would have maybe found different things. That will be interesting to come to repeat that qualitative study in a different cohort and see how their perceptions are and how their stories align with the other group. But what we see that the commonalities in all of that is our inability to really recognize our own needs, to recognize what emotions are coming out. They're probably the huge quagmire of core beliefs that were laid down in our youth and how we respond to triggers and what is coming out and our inability maybe to affect our environment. If you look at the key factors for burnout, then one of them is that you feel powerless within your work environment to change. And so again, you've got all these things coming together, and the screen is often enough something that is becoming part of the stress and part of the triggers. I see how complex it would be to try to squeeze all that into a study. Now, luckily, you've done a qualitative study. So qualitative means that you look at the experiences of your participants rather than trying to nail them down into, try to get a round peg into a drawer somehow. So it is I love it that that there is qualitative studies out there to really highlight the experiences of people. And in qualitative study, you need to let them run to a certain degree. You can guide them, but exactly. So that's a very, very hard thing to do. You did that. So wow. When I record my interviews or when I'm on a Zoom call, sometimes shit happens. Sometimes things just go absolutely all right. And maybe 10 years ago, I would have been very angry. I would have been angry with myself. I would have called myself a failure. You idiot, look at you. You didn't secure that cable and now it came out and we don't have audio or something like that. I would have been very angry. Nowadays, I just begin to love and have a degree of self-compassion that allows me to deal with these things. So I could be overwhelmed if I chose to. So something external happens and you have a choice how you respond to it.
Right.
But again, it takes habits. And again, we need to learn more how to respond to the negative things in our life.
Your example of technological breakdown where the cable isn't there and you need the audio or the camera fails and you're like, ugh, I wasn't prepared sufficiently. I had a whole chapter in my book is focused on when things break down and how we respond to that. And some of the interesting things that I heard rising professionals say as they were like talking through the issues related to tech breakdown. One guy said that gender norms are often problematic for him. They have been problematic for him in some of his workplaces. I wasn't really expecting this, but he said that sometimes men are just assumed to be savvy about certain kinds of tools or certain kinds of technology, and he wasn't. And he said I had to accept that about myself, like I just didn't have that background. And so when people were impatient with him, he had to say, either he didn't respond, or he just had to like console himself, like that is just not a part of my formation.
Yeah.
But I also heard people very candidly reporting that when tech breaks down, they get aggressive. They feel hostile towards the situation, and that's an upwelling of emotion in response to, I need this tool to be working right now, and it's not. It's not. It's not.
This is a sign of them being dysregulated and living under a tsunami of negative emotions and negativity in their life, and it just takes that little hair trigger, that little incidents like something failing, that they can't cope with the situation, and it boils up. I think that is, and then I think that is actually a key message that we have here. If something little like that triggers you to explode or implode, explode as the anger, implode as the crying and hiding in a cubicle, this is really, really powerful. These are beautiful examples of highlighting how stressed these people are. And you could then argue, well, hang on, why are you distressed? And what are you doing in order to balance this out? So I think we need to congratulate these people for having had these outbursts and these frustrations. And if they now recognize it, well, hang on, it has nothing to do with that bloody cable or with that with that screen. It has to do with me, that I didn't make time to heal, to look at myself. What lessons did you draw for yourself from your research? Has your research changed you and changed the way you looked at screen times or any other surrogate markers of that? How did it influence you?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that question. It's a very thoughtful query. When I began, I tried to keep a little bit of distance between myself and the people I was interviewing. Not a lot, but just enough so that I could think about what they were saying,
Yeah.
take notes, sort of be the researcher in the loop. I was doing these interviews during 2022, and I didn't realize that at the time, I didn't realize that was a period of labor market history in the US widely referred to as the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
The stats in our country, in the US, it was that like every month, something like 4 million people switch jobs or quit their jobs.
Wow.
So I didn't realize that was all going on. But as I'm taking notes here, I am noticing that there's a lot of vocational mobility among my research participants. And gradually I heard some of them starting to use the term Great Resignation. And so like my thick head, I gradually got the hang of it. Oh, okay, that's what's going on here. And then, Stefan, I quit my job. I resigned. I switched institutions. And
Okay.
suddenly my research wasn't about other people. I was in the middle of this too, like trying to navigate a new work culture, trying to deal with the digital infrastructure of a new job. And I did feel overwhelmed.
Sure.
And so I think that was one point where my research did not just stay at a remove. My research entered my own life and my own existence and my own way of being in the world. And I had to cope just like the people I was talking to.
Has your screen time changed in response to your study?
Oh no, not enough. Try to take periods of time where I pull back from something. I'll look at something that has become excessive. I need to read more, or I need to meditate more, or I need to pray more, something. And in order to do that, you got to keep your phone downstairs. Not have your laptop be the first thing you open in the morning, but maybe your notebook or your journal or something like that. So I do try to pay attention to my media use, and it's a struggle. The forces at play here are huge. Like the most moneyed, the most powerful corporations in the world are really trying to harvest our attention every chance they get. And they're trying to monetize where we're looking at all times. And so that is something you can't possibly resist on an individual basis all the time. You are going to mess up, or you are going to fall into excess. And so I think it's just starting again, beginning again. Okay, that's gotten to be a bit much. I need to pull back from that. So that's been my experience after doing this research.
We see all the other problems that people face, the uncertainty, the insecurities, the fear, their core beliefs, all that is being compounded by constantly being on the screen, and maybe having less community, less communication, less meeting real people out there. And I think we see those things happening. Such a complex world out there, but equally a world that we have an ability to change. We can change how much we buy into algorithms or buy into screen time, how much we choose to switch off. And I think maybe this might be something that is the key to come out of your research and my research, that we need to question ourselves with what we are doing and why we are doing it. Do we live with intention? No. That's the lesson that I have learned the hard way over the recent years. Is anything of that reflected in the comments that your participants gave you? This kind of level of insight?
Yes, I appreciate the emphasis on resistance that you're giving here in what you've just said. Resisting what's sometimes referred to as the attention economy, the way that concentration, focus, attention is seen as a commodity that's traded by various large corporations. So I do think that what you're saying is right.
This is such a complex world out there. And I think our interview has really pointed that out. Because whilst we both have come up with very valid points, to actually implement them in our daily lives, you can't make blanket kind of statements because one life is so different than the other. One life, you can't do anything about the screen time because you're working remote and the Zoom is your lifeline to your organization, you know? What
That's right.
then, what can you do about that? You can only see the limitations and maybe work around that. Is there a way that we can improve our Zoom experience? And I think that is where we need to emphasize those things in a communication that make us human and try to foster that, try to show the humor, try to show the empathy, try to
Yeah.
show the human emotions that we normally get non-verbally that we can pick up when we're live in a room. So how we can we introduce those being human factors into a abstract Zoom environment?
Well, the way my book breaks it down, I look at 6 different modes of digital communication.
Yeah,
And a mode is like an approach or a style.
yeah,
And so I kind of looked for stories that clustered around various modes of communication.
yeah.
So an example of a mode would be what we're doing right now with a conversation. That's a mode of communication, whether you do it digitally or in person.
Mhm.
It's got its rules, like turn taking is a major rule in conversation. I listen while you speak, you listen while I speak, and so forth. And then another mode might be advocacy,
Yeah.
where you're trying to persuade somebody of something. Another mode would be signaling.
Mm.
Another mode would be like sending things, often by email.
Mm.
And so
Mm.
what I do is I explore each of these modes. And in essence, my overarching question is, how do we stay human while using
Mm.
these modes? What I found was that in each of those modes, they really had gifts in them. They had things that they were just amazing for. They were
Mm.
good for people. But then they would get to a certain point and you'd run into the limitations of
Mm.
each mode as well. A very quick example of this would
Mm.
be there is a real gift in somebody who is a good emailer.
Mm.
If they are able to craft a good email, they're able to make things clear, they're able to write in their own voice, and they're able to make you feel like you're seen and heard. Wow, that's amazing.
Mm.
But what do you do in the situation where you happen to be a good emailer, but your manager only reads 2 lines of an email? Yeah, well, what do you do then? You got to switch modes. And so it's no good just keeping writing the long emails to your boss who doesn't read the emails.
Sure,
You're going to have to find another approach. And
sure.
so being the human in that situation is being willing and flexible and agile to say, okay, I need to switch my mode here. I need to shift my approach. So that's something that I kind of learned from this and that I saw people putting into action.
I think we are used to
Yeah.
communicating in a certain way, and now we are forced to step outside of our comfort zone because the rules are changing. The rules of engagement, so to speak, are changing, and that brings its own stress, its own chaos. Yet we need to adapt. We need to change in response to the external cues and also probably in response to what is happening within us. So if there is an increasing
Yes.
level of anxiety and overwhelm in your body, it's time to stop, stand back, some overview. What is really going on here?
Yeah.
And work
Yeah.
on that. Is it me who is getting overwhelmed because I constantly think of my failing marriage or my financial problems, and that completely overlays the anything that is happening on the screen and the Zoom. I just can't even focus on that bloody communication with my boss. You know, you've got all
Yes.
that underlying chaos, and then the screen
Yeah.
is the trigger.
Right.
Versus,
Right.
I don't know what is actually going on in this Zoom. How can I become a better communicator? Jocko Willink, he is a Navy SEAL who has written a book, Extreme Ownership. And he makes an example of saying, whatever happens, I'm responsible for it. And he doesn't say my fault, but I have got a role to play. So if someone below me in rank doesn't do his job, did I provide him with the right information, with the right guidance, with the right tools to do the job? If someone above me fucks up, well, did I give this person the right information so that he can do that? There is taking an ownership here, and I think we have got that. We are not the victims, but we need to take ownership of our lives. We need to take ownership and actually
Yeah.
see, okay, I'm incredibly worried about talking here on Zoom or doing this interview. Maybe how can I increase my comfort zone here? How can I make that better? Should I do a course on public speaking? Should I join Toastmasters? Should I force myself to do 20 interviews in a row? By the 20th interview, I will have sorted it. So we have got choices to make here. And if there's an overwhelm there, we need to stop, think, feel, accept those feelings, and say, where are they coming from? And what can I do about them? And I think that is a powerful, powerful journey. But so many of us are just on a hamster wheel and we are running, running, running. And it's an absolute nightmare. And isn't it? And I hear you, oh, yeah, okay, I'm on that. Guilty as charged. But luckily, I have been served with so much trauma in my life that I was forced to stop, that I was forced by the universe to learn the hard lessons. And it's amazing who I have become nowadays compared with the past. But that was because I was forced to take action in often uncomfortable ways. And I think if we all get to that, if we all recognize the digital overwhelm as a signal that things are wrong, that our life is not aligned with our purpose, that we might not even have a purpose, that we're just bobbing like a cork on the ocean, then the digital overwhelm is a beautiful message. It's a beautiful catalyst of us
Yes.
getting
Yes.
back on track. And I think your book shows that, because the sheer fact that out of 47, 46, we're actually saying, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Whatever that meant for them was interesting. So we all are suffering from seemingly being overwhelmed.
Yes. I do think it's a gift. I do think that it's an occasion for waking up and saying, what's going on here? And
Right.
how can the term that I tried to use in my book was, how can I practice craft here? How can I be skillful in the waves and the torrent and the tsunami? Is there a way that I can stay afloat, that I can keep my balance, that I can maintain some equilibrium? And I think that mindfulness that you're describing, that awareness, is a good initial step towards developing that kind of life skill of dealing with digital overwhelm.
Well, Craig, this was a very intriguing discussion there, because it just shows how complex the matter is and that there are
Yes, indeed.
sometimes no easy solutions. We couldn't come up with, say, do this, do that, and you're going to
Yeah,
be
right.
fine, and we're riding into the sunset. No.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? But I think what we modeled here is to ask questions and listen to the others. So we communicated really well here under difficult circumstances because we have never met each other. So we have
Yeah.
got really such multifactorial issues here where sometimes you can't find an easy answer. But you can actually take time out and just think, and see what
Yeah.
3 points you can take away from a discussion or from a meeting. If you feel that something didn't go well in a meeting, what can I learn from that?
Yeah.
And it might turn out that you had not eaten, you had not drunken enough fluid, that you had not slept well last night, and you were ratty as hell today. Well, guess what? That is something you can learn from that. And if you say, it went really well, that meeting, why? Ask yourself why. What did I do here? Why was I flowing like that? Learn from it. So we can learn from every single teacher, and teachers come in the most interesting forms. But teachers appear when the student is ready. So let's get ready to learn and take every experience that we face Let that be a Zoom meeting, let that be an email, how we respond to it, and see, okay, let's see what we can learn from that. And I think that is what I'm taking away from today for myself. I've identified the email as a major issue because there's so much
Yeah.
crap coming
Yeah.
through my
Yeah.
email. So what
Sure.
can I
Sure.
do to actually address my emails? How can I deal with that? How can I deal with my fear and the fear avoidance? And then what can I do about it? And I love it when we think about the Zoom. We use the first 10 minutes of our interview to get everything set up. And maybe it's the same that we can learn for other situations that we get overwhelmed with. How can we set ourselves up in a better way for a scenario that we predictably know we will get overwhelmed? And just accept it that it is normal to be overwhelmed. It's absolutely normal
Right.
in the world.
Yes.
There will
So
always,
important to say that.
isn't it? So digital overwhelm
Yeah.
or any overwhelm, let's accept it for what it is. It's just part of life. But how can we deal with it? What can we do? And if we can't do anything, how do we still keep going? And how we still maintain being human and being there for your own needs under difficult circumstances? Fair
Here,
to
here.
say?
Here.
I hate negative emotions. I want to be always happy, and I want to be that Coca-Cola advertisement, always young and always bouncy and always, yeah, about that. So no, life is not like that, and I need to learn that again and again and again. But every time I'm learning it, I'm getting stronger. Every time I'm experiencing it and stopping and questioning what's going on, I'm getting stronger. And I think we all have got that opportunity. So guys, if you feel overwhelmed out there, welcome to the show. Welcome to the live. And it is beautiful. Just make the most out of it and learn. Greg, thank you so much. If people want to know more about you, where can they buy your book?
Anywhere books are sold. So there's a little company called Amazon that it's available there, Digital Overwhelm there. But my website is The Mode Switch, all one word, themodeswitch.com, and they can find out more about my work and things I've written there.
Brilliant. Guys, look down there into the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast. All of Greg's information is down there. And thank you so much for being a guest on my show. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
highlighting a very complex issue out there that affects so many people, often without them even recognizing what's going on. They just feel uncomfortable and in pain and don't even know what is contributing to it. You are highlighting some of the
that's
things,
right.
isn't it?
That's right.
So thank you very much for having done that study, having produced your book, and being out there as a voice to highlight the issue of digital overwhelm. And it's so beautiful to actually give at least a framework there that people maybe can touch upon and can actually say, okay, hang on, there are various ways of actually addressing that and making life just that little bit easier, taking some of the stress out of it by being more prepared. And that's what you offer them, and that's fantastic. So thank you so much for
Thank
the
you
work
for
that you've
saying
done. Absolutely.
Thank you for saying that.
And you guys out there, look after yourself, live with passion and live with intention. Okay, bye.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up.